background. Sorry, I'm coming to you from a strange place in my house. It is basically the only light I can find because the weather outside is hideous and deeply offensive. But because it has blacked out the whole of the sun, this is the only place I can find enough light to actually be seen, so sorry about that. Right, okay. So, NovNov! Novellas in November! Something that I am going to devote my whole life to next November, I think. I am trying to do Novellas in November and Believe-a-thon at the same time, and I feel like both of these things are amazing, but trying to do them both at once is clouding each of them, so I'm not able to devote my whole life to one or the other. It's not quite enough. So I think next year it's Novellas in November all the way, but for now, this November, I have managed to get a couple of novellas under my belt. I think the majority of how I've been participating in Novellas in November is just the purchasing of novellas. So I'll have to do like a NovNov haul later in this month because it's been on my mind, like Novellas in November. Every time I go out, I just see another novella and think, this will probably be awesome. And thus I need it to come home with me. Even if I'm like, this will probably just be okay, I still feel like it needs to come home with me. So this has created a problem, but a later problem. I'll deal with this problem later. I am not worried about this. Anyway, also my original NovNov TBR got a bit messed up because I've been sort of blowing through these novellas and also finding that some of them I actually didn't like very much. And then after I read a novella I didn't like, I feel like I need to try again and I need to read a different novella that is more likely to be amazing and less likely to be not amazing. Oh my god, there's a guy outside my window. Oh my god, what's he doing? What are you doing? He just picked a wedgie. Oh, for ages. Oh, he was digging to China for that. See, that's a lesson to you. Don't do embarrassing things outside even though you think no one can see you. Especially if you do it in front of windows because everyone can see you. Anyway, I've been there, friend. I feel you. I'll not judge you for that situation. So, I'm gonna do 4 novellas today that I read. 3 of which were on my TBR originally and 1 that I got through BorrowBox, which is this app I have connected to my public library. I can check out, like I get this app and then I can check out audiobooks on the app for 20 days as long as it's available to check out. Like if there's too many people that have checked out, I can't check it out. So then I just join the queue. But anyway, I've joined the queue for several of these books that I want to read, and then they sort of just come up whenever the other person has returned it. So then I just get bombarded with all of these books that I wanted to read eventually, but now suddenly have to read right now because I only have a certain amount of time to read them. So one of them that came up was The Cellist of Sarajevo by something Galloway. I remember the Galloway because that was my great-grandmother's surname. But I don't remember the first name. I think it's Stephen. I will put a photo approximately here. Anyway, the 3 I read that were on my TBR were these 3, and then The Cellist of Sarajevo as well. 2 of them I really liked a lot, and the other 2, one of them I just hated. I don't know what happened. It just did not go well. And another one was just sort of okay. Not my favorite. Wasn't bad, blah, blah, blah. So we'll get to it. Okay, so the first one that I read that I absolutely loved was Homeland by Barbara Kingsolver. I love Barbara Kingsolver. Love her. The first one I read of hers in high school was Poisonwood Bible, and now I just read everything of hers. I love it. So when I saw this one, I was like, yes, I've never read that one. I need to get it. But I think we need to be honest with ourselves about what this actually is. It's a short story, isn't it? It is, yeah. It's not a novella. It's just a short story. And it's just basically Faber and Faber messing with me. They've made it look like it's its own book so that they can convince me to pay the same amount of money for it that I would pay for another book. But it's fine. I love them, so I'm happy to be fooled by them. I just feel like, you know, we should be honest with what we're doing here. So it took me approximately 8 seconds. Like, I sneezed and it was done, but, you know, that's fine. I have counted that as a Goodreads read in order to reach my goal. Like, the premise of this one is that this girl, she lives in Kentucky. I don't exactly know when it is that she's growing up in Kentucky, but I think it's a bit ago, like maybe 50s or 60s, something like that. Maybe I'm wrong, somebody can correct me. But she lives, when she's a kid, with her grandmother and her parents. So her grandmother's sort of getting old, forced to sort of live out her twilight years with her son and his family. So she is originally Cherokee, sort of, you know, full-blood, living a traditional Cherokee lifestyle when she's younger. And it comes to a point where they're the only sort of band of Cherokee left. Like, they were the only ones to escape all of the sort of life-changing things forced on their people by sort of like white European Americans. One of the rules of the clan is that you have to marry outside the clan, and there are no clans left. So in order to get married, she's got to marry a white guy. So she falls in love with this guy, rides out of the hills into Kentucky with him on a stolen horse, whatever. And she's really sort of like white European American-ish in the way that she talks. She speaks really well. She's really well read. She's really classy and sophisticated, and dresses really nice. However, she smokes a pipe and sometimes comes out with things that are obvious holdovers from when she was like fully traditionally Cherokee, and it sounds strange to the ears of people who weren't raised like that. Like, she'll sort of say, the small people are not very bright tonight, when she's talking about stars. Or there is a stray dog that comes to the house sometimes and begs for food, and she calls him sad little cousin. And she smokes her pipe outside, so like everyone thinks that that's a bit crazy. Even like it's really cold and she's just outside on the porch like smoking a pipe. She is like in the process of teaching all of her sort of Cherokee wisdom to her granddaughter, and her granddaughter is really stressed and worried about how she won't remember everything that her grandmother has taught her. The grandmother is not worried at all. She's like, the heart remembers, which I think is gorgeous of an idea. And one sort of occurrence in the book is the granddaughter picks some flowers and brings it in for the grandmother, and the grandmother's really sad, and she's like, you can't pick them, you know, you have to let them stand, you have to leave them there. Like, flowers deserve to live out their life where they've grown, you know. And sort of from then on, the granddaughter, even though she's sort of like raised in this white European community where everyone picks all the flowers and they're no big deal, blah, 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 she has this like inbuilt sort of Cherokee idea that everything should grow always where it was planted. And it obviously relates to the family as well, you know. The grandmother was sort of plucked from where she was planted and can't quite, you know, cope with living out the rest of her life somewhere where she's not supposed to be, or in a life that she wasn't meant for. Like, the writing in the book, sort of like describing this, the words that Barbara Kingsolver uses, and like while it was going, I was sort of like reading it in a southern accent as well, like in my mind. The family, like the son, who obviously doesn't properly understand his mother's Cherokee-ness, he doesn't understand like the way of life. The grandmother skipped the son. He's like, he doesn't understand. I will put my wisdom on to his daughter instead. So he's like, my mother's gonna die soon. I should take her back to where she came from so she can see it for the last time. And the grandmother's like, I don't want to go back. And he's like, no, come on, it's fine. And then everyone's like, I think grandma doesn't want to go back. And he's like, it's fine, get in the car. So they go for this like ridiculously long road trip to this place called like Cherokee, Tennessee or whatever. And once they get there, they see that it's just like a tourist trap now. Nothing about it is actually Cherokee. It's like people, it's like Native Americans doing like stereotypical Indian dancing with like feather crowns and like doing it for money. Like, they've got a hat and everyone puts money in, and then people take pictures of them, you know. There's like teepees around that don't make any sense because they're the wrong type of teepee, and the Native Americans are wearing the wrong kind of headdress or whatever because Cherokees don't actually wear that kind. And the grandmother's just sort of sat in the car looking around like, this is not it, you know. And the granddaughter sort of asks her like, aren't you gonna get out of the car? Don't you want to see where you're from? And the grandmother's like, I've never been here, you know. They basically just like get a cheesy tacky toy and a cheesy tacky meal, and they get back in the truck and drive all the way back to Kentucky where they're from, because they only had like a weekend off or something like that. And it's just like a really bullshit trip, and the grandmother's like, you don't understand, it's gone, you know? And like you just get the sense that the whole thing is about, you know, not leaving things to grow up where they're meant to grow up, you know, and transplanting things, and how things don't ever grow right after they've been plucked, you know. And I just really loved the writing of it, and I loved like how things were described, and I just love the idea of the grandmother. But just read this, it takes you 8 seconds. I don't know why you wouldn't. Unless you don't want to pay like the full amount for a book for just this, and then I understand you. Okay, so the next one I read that I loved is The Cellist of Sarajevo by something Galloway. And this one I listened to an audiobook from my library, and it was really good because in the audiobook there's actually cello music going on, like at the beginning or like between sections and everything. And it's really calming and soothing, and I was sort of sitting on my sofa just with a coffee like, oh. And it's actually made me make a cello playlist for my phone so that I can listen to it while I'm reading. It's like not something that I would have thought of, you know, cello music in the background, but it was so soothing and amazing to have in the background while I was reading that I just thought, I'm gonna make this my life now. My life is about reading novellas to cello music now, just in case you didn't know. So the sort of premise of the novella is that there's a man, a cellist. He plays cello outside his apartment every day for like 22 days or something like that. And it's during the siege of Sarajevo in the 90s. So like, if you don't know what this was, it was the sort of, I think the Bosnian Serbs, or like Serbs of some kind, went up into the hills above Sarajevo. So Sarajevo was like a bucket. Like I went there about 10 years ago on a trip. And it's gorgeous, and it's sort of like mountainy, but just sort of sits in a bowl, the city. So up on the hill, sort of surrounding the city, these snipers and military people sort of surrounded the city, and then just sort of literally shooting fish in a bowl, sort of sending shells in and sniping people, just murdering people in mass amounts in the city as they're trying to go about doing their normal life. Sort of people are trying to cross bridges, and they're sort of stopping and like looking around. They're hoping someone will go first, so that if they get shot, they know that that's not a good way to go because the sniper is looking at the bridge. If they make it all the way across, then they're like, okay, so the sniper's not doing it here right now, like should I give it a go? And when they do try to run across the bridge, they like go in zigzags like this to like make it harder for people to shoot them. Like, it's hilarious when it's like being described when you think about it, but obviously it's not hilarious. It's devastating that people's lives have to sort of come to that, just in normal ways that they're living their lives. Like, they have to go get water, you know, they have to take my jug to the water place, but to get from here to there and back again to get water for my children, I have to do this like dickhead, like moving back and forth on the bridge so that I don't get sniped. But while that's happening, the cellist is in the background. He's playing, he's committed to playing, he's right in full view of anyone who wants to shell him or sniper him, but he still does it. He does it for 22 days. And the story's told from a couple different viewpoints. So there's Arrow. She's a sniper. She's a Bosnian sniper, a sniper from Sarajevo, shooting up instead of down. Her role is to kill people from the hills, like shooting down. And she's taken the name Arrow. It's not her real name, because she wants to sort of separate who she is as a person from the person that she's had to become in order to shoot these people on the hills. So, you know, she's actually Alyssa, but when she's a sniper, she's not Alyssa anymore. She's Arrow. And there's another man who's the father of, I think, 2 or 3 kids, and he lives with his kids and his wife. And he's got a really crotchety neighbour who's horrible to him, but he has to go sort of every week or whatever from the apartment building to the brewery up in the hills to get water. And he gets water for the crotchety neighbor as well, even though she's always horrible to him. Like, he's like, why am I doing this? I'm risking my life for this woman. But sort of basically, she's just been broken down by war. You know, she would have been probably an absolutely lovely woman, except that she lived through World War II, and now before she could have the, you know, luck to die a happy old lady death, she now has to live through this other one that's probably even more horrific than the other one. And he sort of recognizes that in the end. And then there's a third guy who's a baker, and he's an older man, and he's living during the war with his sister and his sister's husband because he sent his family away. He was able to get his wife and his kids out of the country before the conflict sort of kicked off. He sent them to Italy. And he's having a really hard time coping with addressing what life used to be versus what it is now. So he's like, he doesn't want to talk to his neighbor about reminiscing about Sarajevo and the days before the war. He's not interested. He's just hardened to it. He's having a hard time coping with the difference that life is now. But like, sort of the overall sort of feeling of it is that like Hugh is sort of about like what happens to people in their minds during prolonged conflict, and sort of how important it is to like preserve the humanity of the people and of the society and everything. And the only way that things can be rebuilt and recover after the war is if humanity has been preserved in some of the people and some of the society and everything. And as the story goes on, the people do realize that, and they start to change how they're acting in order to better embrace their humanity and their neighbors and connections with their fellow city people, you know. And all the while in the background, the cellist sort of screaming that to everyone, screaming that humanity and the preservation of humanity is the most important thing, and sort of just like shouting his humanity down into the people like that. But I just loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved the writing of it. I loved all the characters. I really like Sarajevo as a town, and I really like all of these stories that come out of Sarajevo from this time. Like obviously it's horrific, and I wish that it hadn't happened. But I love hearing stories about this time. Like one of my favorite books is People of the Book by Geraldine Brooks. It's about sort of the burning of the library in Sarajevo and how this one man, this like Muslim man, went through all of this trouble and fuss to save this really important Jewish Haggadah, this book that is really important, not in his religion, but in someone else's religion. And how sort of Sarajevo had so many different religions in it, and how they lived together so well before the war, and how they're trying to sort of rebuild that after as well. But my dad, when I was a kid, actually had to go and be part of the conflict in Bosnia. So he was in the US military. So when Clinton sort of engaged American military in sort of like peacekeeping forces or whatever in the war there, my dad had to go. And while he was away, I remember thinking, oh, I don't know anything about Bosnia. Where did he go? I'm really worried. I'm really scared. And then when he came home, he had all these presents for me from Bosnia, and he had all these stories about how beautiful and friendly Bosnia is. And then when I was old enough to travel, I immediately went to Bosnia, just like with my friend. She's like, why are we going all the way on this crappy bus to this middle of nowhere town and the middle of nowhere mountain, like surrounded by potential landmine stuff? And I was like, shut up, it's very important. And I cannot like tell you how amazing it was to be there. It's just like the best town, the best people. It was gorgeous, and like a life-changing experience. Anyway, Cellist of Sarajevo, amazing. Okay, so the first one that wasn't as amazing as the other two. This one was pretty good. I didn't hate it, but it wasn't my favorite, whatever. This one is Mostly Hero by Anna Burns. I read another book by Anna Burns called Milkman, and I loved that one, so I thought, oh, definitely get this one. And it is sort of similar-ish, like the writing style is sort of the same. The way no one has an actual name, they're only called, you know, like by their title or by what they do or their nickname or something like that. And sort of like a sort of dark, comic, sort of ironic style to it as well is similar. But I think in the end, this one was just a little bit too, I don't know, like boring? Yeah, it was like a bit boring and a bit too much. So the sort of balance of weirdness and like irony and sort of feeling and everything in Milkman was really good and really well balanced. Whereas I think this is sort of pushed too far toward like the absurd and silly. And like, I like a good weird book. Like, I am into delightfully weird things. But this was just like pushed too far to the silliness. Like a bit like a comic book. Like, I don't know. I didn't really like it. I liked it, but it wasn't the best. Anyway, so the premise of this one is that there's a guy named Superhero who's a superhero. And he's dating a girl who is femme fatale. She doesn't have a name. She's just femme fatale. And she has a spell put on her by all of the villains in the town who want to kill Superhero. So the spell on her is that she will always try to kill Superhero, but she will not know that she's doing it. So like, she's just on, you know, a date with Superhero and they're making out, and all of a sudden she takes the fork and tries to stab Superhero, you know, and then afterwards she's like, oh, and then I went to the club and it was so amazing. Like, she has no recollection that she's just tried to kill him. But he knows that there's this spell on her. And because he doesn't trust anyone, and he doesn't trust that there's no one on the earth that's trying to kill him, he's always prepared for it. You know, like the fork comes at his face and he's like, he just deflects and then he continues to talk or whatever. And the girl, she has a great aunt who's this frail, kindly old woman who just watches television all day because she's so old and she can't do anything else and she can't leave her house. But actually, it turns out that she's a supervillain. And she is also trying to take over the world currently. And she would like to kill Superhero as well. But she can't really bring herself to do it because she does actually like her niece, femme fatale, and doesn't want to make her sad by killing her boyfriend. But then as it's going through the book, loads of different revelations come up and different things are added to the story that you didn't know before. So it'll be like, oh, the great frail aunt, actually she's a supervillain. Oh, she doesn't want to kill Superhero, but actually she's the one who killed Superhero's whole family. So Superhero knows that she's done that and he has a super grudge on her. So he's going to try to kill her. And actually, because she dated his grandfather, she could be his grandmother. And actually, he knows all this stuff, so the only reason that he was dating femme fatale in the first place because he was using her to get to her great aunt so that he could kill her. And he's like from this intense stock of these superheroes, and you know, he's like the product of a long line of superhero-ness, but actually, he's not from that long line of superheroes, he's from a long line of supervillains. So it's villainy that's in his blood, so is he a villain? Like, anyway. I think like the main thing about the book, like the thing that it all comes down to is that, you know, Superhero's having this existential crisis. He's like, am I a hero after all, you know, or am I a villain? Or am I just average? Like, there's a part where femme fatale is like, all of these things that you say are your superhero powers, they're not actually superhero powers, are they? They're just like extreme behaviors of normal humans, you know? And they're not actually just behaviors of normal humans. They're like flaws of normal humans. Like your extreme tidiness, you know? That's not a superhero thing. That's just like OCD, basically. And so he has to sort of like come to terms with, oh, actually I'm related to these villains. Oh, actually I have a grudge so deep that it makes me want to murder loads and loads of people. Like, I'm not, you know, am I actually a superhero? You know, is anyone actually a superhero? Like, or is just everyone just average, you know, and everyone is just a little bit of good and bad, blah, blah. Like, I think that idea and sort of like the path that he takes to come to that realization is good. It's just that, like, it was just too silly, I think. And if I'm saying that, like, there's something a bit over the top about it. Okay. So the last one I read was The Girls of Slender Means by Muriel Sparks. And I do not know what happened with this book. I don't know. I read The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie and I really liked it. And I was watching a novella video by Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and she said that she read a Muriel Sparks one recently. I can't remember the name. I'll link that video below. But she was sort of talking about how she really liked it, and I thought, oh my god, yeah, that one sounds really good. Like, I'll read that one. I put that one on a list. But this one, like, I don't know if I was just having like a mini stroke or something while I was reading it, but if I was a person that DNFs things, I would have DNF'd it. It was just too boring. It just lost me completely, and I had to sort of push all the way through with the rest of it. Basically, the premise is, there's this guy in the 60s. He's martyred in Haiti, so he was like a priest. He was a Jesuit. He was in Haiti and he was murdered. But he used to be an atheist, sort of in the 40s. He was like very sort of strongly an atheist. So this journalist who used to know him in the 40s, sort of through the Mayf Tech Club, which was like a sort of apartment complex / boarding house, she knew him as an atheist in the 40s, and she wanted to know sort of what happened. How did he become a Jesuit? How did he end up in Haiti? You know, how did he die? Blah, blah, blah. So she goes hunting for information about this stuff, and it sort of swings back then to the 40s, everyone in the Mayf Tech Club. So the club itself was created for young women who, through necessity, like jobs or school or something, had to live away from their family in London, and they needed a place that was sort of wholesome and cheap to live while they sort of went about their lives working or doing school or whatever. And it basically reads like a sorority, you know. They go about doing normal sorority stuff, like the girls are really shallow, they're really obsessed with like money and finding boyfriends, you know, and having more money in order to get better boyfriends and blah, blah, blah. There's a part where they try to like sneak through this really small hole in a window in order to sunbathe on the roof, but one of the girls is just too fat and can't do it. So like, I guess, I don't know, like girls of like slender means, you know, slender means as in they're all poor and have to live in this like place where poor people live and it's after the war and everyone's poor, or slender as in like it's like just good enough to go on the roof, you know, through the hole. But there's like the 4 main girls. Like there's Jane, who is the like person writing the article, and in the 40s, like with them, she's like fat. She's really smart, but she's like the chubby one. There's Joanna, who's like really kind and like sweet as a person. There's Pauline, who's kind of like the wild one, like wild and crazy one. And then there's Selena, who's gorgeous, but like super self-absorbed and like selfish and a bit of a crap person. So there's just like a hella ton of them just doing normal sorority crap in the 40s. And like approximately here is where I like just went and like woke up a bit, and something interesting happened, which was that a sort of undetonated bomb finally detonated. So it was sort of stuck and no one knew about it, and it was next door or whatever, and it exploded and it caused a fire in this boarding house, and everyone had to sort of get out of the house away from the fire, and they had to crawl through this window, this tiny window. It happens, like, I won't tell you exactly, just in case you want to, like, read this and make of it what you will, you know. Selena does something that maybe is a bit selfish and indirectly leads to potentially one of the girls not making it out in time. And Farrington, this guy who ended up being a Jesuit, this ultimately leads to him going from being an atheist to a devout Jesuit priest. So this was very, like, the writing and everything, like, was very Muriel Sparks. And in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, that writing really fit and I really enjoyed it. But in this one, I found it to just be a snooze fest. I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about lunch, and I don't know if that was me in my mood at the time, or if it's the book itself. Like, I think in the end I gave it 3 stars instead of 2, because I worry that I missed something, like something was off, like I was just too hungry that day, or too hungover, or like something about my mood affected my ability to take the book in properly. I don't know. But like when I failed at this one and felt like crap about the novella project, that's when I had to sort of read The Cellist of Sarajevo. And I feel like The Cellist of Sarajevo brought it all the way back. So I'm recovered from the sadness of this one. I have now taken in one of my favorites in a while. So that's good. It's a good balance. Okay, so that's the end of those. Those 3 guys, plus The Cellist of Sarajevo. If you've read any of those, or want to read any of those, or have any thoughts, please let me know in the comments. I definitely need to have chats about the ones that I loved, but also this one. If anyone has read this, and actually liked it, I definitely want to know, because I'm worried about not liking it. I think my next NovNov video will have to be a NovNov haul because I've acquired so many amazing new novellas in the month of November. And I think I'm also going to do a couple other like reading review ones for it, because I have a couple more that I want to read. Like I think four more I definitely want to read before the end of November. Hopefully even more than that. If you are doing a bit of NovNov, if you've read some novellas for November, please let me know. Put it in the comments, tell me which ones that you've liked or not liked, or how you're doing. If you're getting through quite a lot of novellas, or if you're like me in that you have failed pretty miserably to fully get into the novellas for November. Anyway, till next time, goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.